It's truly incredible how powerful words are and how one word can just totally transform our life. Today, I want to talk about one word, and that word is compulsion. Compulsion means the action or state of forcing or being forced to do something, or constraint. Not a positive word. So I'm going to talk about how that word has really affected my life and also how it's affecting the lives of thousands and millions of other people in our world and in our nation especially. So I'm going to be using that word compulsion or compulsory as it relates to the school system. As a disclaimer, I know some of you will not agree with this. I know that some of you may find even some of this stuff offensive, but I am going to just share my story. I'm going to share my journey as a homeschool mom and how I can't imagine doing anything else other than educating my children, because there is such dramatic flaws in the school system, whether people want to admit that or not. And it really needs to be addressed. I know a lot of people are turning to different schooling routes because they're seeing this decline in education systems. I believe it's only going to get worse. So let's talk about this. How is the school system, compulsory? Well, I'll give you a little bit of my background. I really enjoyed school growing up, but it was because I had a very different kind of school that I went to. I went to a small Christian school, and the dynamic of the classroom was very, very different than, say, the public school across town. We did the ACE curriculum, which I would be surprised if there's too many schools out there these days using the ACE curriculum, but it's where you were basically self-motivated, self-disciplined, and the kid would actually just kind of teach themselves. There was a teacher administrating the classroom. They were called supervisors, but they weren't standing in front of the class teaching the whole class. We were given these little pieces that were just basically like 20 or 30 page booklets, and we set our own goals each day, and we got to work at our own pace. So that meant if you were done with your work by lunchtime, you were done for the day. After lunch, you got to have fun the rest of the day. And you could work as quickly as you wanted, or, as slowly as you wanted. So there wasn't per se like grades. Yes, we were categorized in grades, but if you excelled to the next grade, that was no big deal. In fact, I did really well in this system. And so come my junior and especially my senior year, I was basically done. I wasn't quite ready to, say, go off to college. And back in those days, it's not like today where they had a lot of college programs when you're in high school. And so I was still required to at least show up. But my senior year, I was there for an hour a day, and the teachers were basically like, you don't really even need to be here. And I had so much freedom. I worked a job. I was able to do other things in my life that I wanted to do instead of being like in these classes and going from class to class and being, overloaded like most high school students are. So I enjoyed school. I enjoyed the fact that it taught me to be a goal setter. It taught me how to be self-motivated. So many of those things I can see is why I am the way I am today, and who I am today is because I wasn't in a compulsory schooling. Now, it did have its flaws. It did have its challenges. It wasn't a perfect school, and for a lot of years I didn't think very highly of this particular curriculum. But as the years have gone on, I've been able to see this really set me up for my future to make me, like I said, who I am today. The difference in, say, compulsory schooling is that you have to do it a certain way. You have teachers that require it to go a certain way. You have homework assignments that you have to complete by this certain time. You're really forced into it. There's a lot of, like that definition says, you're being forced to do something, and it's like constraint. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having structure. I absolutely think that kids need structure. But how many kids are out there feeling like they're constrained? Like they can't move about freely, that they can't do what they want to do, that they can't explore the things they want to explore because there's such this heavy workload, and then even coming home with tons of homework. I mean, when are they supposed to even discover who they are? Childhood is meant to train you into becoming the person that you're supposed to be, that God has created you to be. So how are these children in elementary school or junior high or high school, how are they ever going to discover what God has gifted them in when there's this compulsion to have this huge workload? And let's just be honest, majority of it is simply busy work. It's not necessary. I heard this really great advice. I've started to do it with my kids, where you sit down in a curriculum book and instead of doing, let's say it's math, instead of doing all 20 to 30 problems on the page for my, fourth grader, I just have her do the first line. There's maybe 6 problems in the first line. And you know what? If she does it fairly quickly, she's not struggling and it's right, I'm like, we'll move on. We'll go to the next thing. We'll flip over a few pages. We'll try that. And she's just got it down. We don't have to be burdened so much by, you have to complete this whole page and I'm going to grade you. What are grades, right? Other than a kid being felt like either, yay, I'm a good person, or, oh, I failed, right? When there's so many different types of kids out there, and not all of them learn the best in the book work setting. That's a whole topic for another discussion. But let's just see where our kids are at any given time, because they're constantly learning, especially if they're, say, in homeschool and they're giving vivid opportunities to just explore life, just to be themselves. It's really incredible how much a kid will learn when they just have freedom in their life and they're not in compulsory schooling. Back to my story, I graduated out of this system and it was great. I graduated valedictorian, I did, awesome all throughout, and I go to college. And this was a small Bible college, but it was compulsory, right? The classrooms looked traditional, the teachers were traditional, it's at a college level. So as you can imagine, it was a bit shocking for me. And although I still did well and my grades were okay, I was a mess. I was emotionally drained every single day because I was now put in this compulsory system where I was afraid of not pleasing the teacher, not getting a good grade, not, performing right. And I look back on that and think, that was really sad. I'm fresh out of high school, starting my adult life as like a little baby adult, we'll call it. And the first thing I encounter is this action or state of being forced to do something or constraining. So I lasted 3 years there, and it was, I had a lot of good experiences, but overall it was a bit traumatizing for me. And I remember I finally settled with a 2-year degree. Of course I was going for a bachelor's degree, but after 3 years of it, I was ready to move on. I moved off to California and I didn't even miss it. I put my head forward, got a job I really, really enjoyed, and, kind of put that compulsion behind me. I don't think we're designed to learn that way. There's a quote by Plato that says, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'll try to kind of remember the gist of it. Basically, if you're under compulsion when learning, you're not going to retain it as well. You're not going to learn it to the best. Why is that? Because God has given us a natural desire to learn. It's from birth. I mean, how does a kid learn how to walk? They watch, they observe, intuition, right? I mean, we're just designed to learn how to do stuff. How do they talk? How do they do anything, right? Why are we told, preschool is best to just play? Because that's how they learn. Then all of a sudden they get thrown into elementary school where there's this ridiculous control over their life. And sadly, so many of their spirits get quenched. So many of them get so burdened down, and instead of their desire to learn and their joy in those first several years, now they are hating learning. They can't stand it. They can't wait to come home. They can't wait to get out of it. I have a mentor who now, once again, not everyone's going to like this statement, but this high-level influencer that I think of as a mentor calls it child prison. And when I first heard that, I like a lot of you, I thought, oh my gosh, is that okay to say? But as I started thinking about it more, I realized, yeah, I believe that. These kids have no choice. These kids hate it. Sometimes. I mean, there is the exception. Don't get me wrong. There's always the exception. But sadly, across the board, there's just a forcing a child to do something that they don't want to do. They don't want to learn that way. They don't want to experience life the way that they're given. And so we put them for 12 years in this system. No wonder when they graduate and get out, so many 20-somethings are just fumbling around in life because they don't know how to think for themselves. They don't know how to live their lives the way that God's given them. We have a seed of creativity placed in all of us from God for a very unique and specific purpose and assignment. And sadly, these adults, baby adults, have no idea what that is for their life because they've been told how to do it, when to do it, what it's supposed to look like. They've gotten labels, they've gotten grades, they've gotten all this stuff in this system that does not set them up for their future. I know that this is not something we like to hear. I was that person. I was an elementary teacher before having kids. I started off in my homeschool journey extremely rigid. That was before having 5 kids. I think God gave me 5 kids to totally break down any rigidness that I had and to mold me and shape me into, listen, a child should be allowed to have some freedom. Yes, they need some structure, and yes, they need discipline. I'm not saying that. They need to be guided, but not every kid is going to learn the same way, and not every kid is even going to learn well in a classroom. These children need to have the opportunity to explore other possibilities, other things. They need to own their time. They need to think for themselves. They need to be able to learn and have the desire to learn for them to actually truly grow up in the world and do something of value for the world around them and for the kingdom of heaven. I hope that this has helped you kind of connect some dots. Sometimes we just kind of blindly go through, we've grew up in the system, we've not questioned the system hardly at all, and so why would we really think about these things? But I encourage you to go into that word compulsion or compulsory schooling. Look up some other people's testimonies on it. There's a lot out there on this subject actually, because I think that a lot of people are waking up to realize that the system of school is failing and the system of school is not providing what it used to for our kids. There may have been a time in history where it was a good thing, where there was factories coming up and they needed workers for the factory. But you know what? We're not in that time anymore. We have so many possibilities. We have the internet and so much expanding technology-wise. They can discover their passions. They can think for themselves these days. And that's not how the school system was set up. And the school system is pretty much running the same way it has for all of these years. That's something we should question, and that's something that we should be warned about with our own kids. What are they truly learning, and what is setting them up for their future with what they're learning? A kid is going to learn how to read. A kid is going to learn how to write. They're going to learn math, and there's thousands of ways to teach them that don't have to be they're stuck in a classroom for 6 to 8 hours a day feeling like they're in prison. Let's set them up for freedom and a bright future.